It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Sherbert of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
And a good morning to those of you that are listening live and watching live on YouTube. Welcome for installment number 244 of JC and Morgan. JC is out this week. He's having some surgery, nothing to be alarmed about. I always feel like I've got to give some details when I say someone's having surgery, but then I always feel like that's kind of personal as well. Let's just say it is nothing overly serious. He's going to be fine, back in the saddle soon enough. And we wish him well on the surgery that's going on today. A man that's no stranger to surgery and many other procedures is our special part-time guest, part-time co-host, a friend of the family here on the Chief Sports Network. And JC and Morgan is ESPN's Tom Luginbill. Lugs, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Speaking of surgery, that was the first thing I asked you when you texted me yesterday. And I said, is he all right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yeah. He's okay. So I get it. Like, you say that word for some reason, and everybody jumps to it's something horrible, right?
I know.
Right? I guess, I don't know. I guess that's our caring nature, if you will.
It is. And, you know, by the way, we're recording this on the morning that literally just minutes ago it was announced Jerry West has passed away.
Yeah, 86 years old.
Now the logo, I mean, you're talking about royalty. He's obviously before our time in terms of we didn't grow up watching him. But if you grow up watching any basketball, then you know the history. You've seen the footage. You know what he meant to the game. You know how special a player he was. So and I've seen so many interviews with him, and every time he talks, I'm just like fixated because he's not just a great player, a Hall of Famer, but a guy that's very much responsible for when the Lakers were actually good, putting those teams together and being a great front office guy. So, yeah, I don't know about you, Luke's. I've had way too many people leave us early here in the last couple of years. Some in our business, some just friends. Some people from all walks of life, from high school or former neighbors, what have you. So, but in the case of JC, the surgery is nothing to be worried about. So, yes, I felt the need to clarify that. I asked him this morning. I said, "Well, what is it?" And he told me what it was. I'm like, "All right, well, that's too personal. I'm not going into that, but I'll just mention that."
It's non-life threatening.
Exactly. But we don't need to, I don't like throwing people's business out there. It's just not my style. We got a lot to get to, Lugs. We're going to go guest list today. We're probably going to have Bruce Feldman on next week. And it's funny. I mean, we talk about it so much. Here we are. It's mid-June, and these used to be the dog days of summer. And as I'm kind of like outlining what I want to get into today, I'm like, I don't even know if we can fit all this in a little over than an hour, because that's what the off season now in college football is absolutely nuts. So, I mean, we talk about some of the headlines. I mean, you've got the SEC meetings that came and went in Destin, a lot of talk out of that. You've got the new TV windows, the things. When you're scheduling your tailgating or your road trips now, it's a little bit easier to schedule. That is the benefit. This is no knock on CBS. We're not taking pot shots at other networks, but because you had two networks and because you had one that always had the first choice, everybody else had to wait on that. You were at the mercy of CBS's schedule. That is no longer the case. We can talk about that. I had I'll talk about this in the second block. I had a great discussion with one guy that I've known for a long time who's a huge FSU fan, and another guy who's a big Big Ten fan. He went to Purdue, and we're bellying up to the bar, and next thing I know, I am involved. And you've been in this situation, I'm sure, Lugs, where you've got friends and they know what we do for a living, and they assume you want to get immersed in any college football argument, debate, discussion, even when it's, a day that you're not on the clock, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I usually have very good willpower to stay away. I am like, you know what, guys, whatever you think. And they're like, what do you mean, whatever you think, Mike? I know you've got strong opinions on this. We know you've got knowledge on this. Like, no, whatever you think. Well, a couple of high noons in, and I'm like, okay, now there's too much misinformation going on here by Big Ten Kenny. I gotta go ahead and correct some things. I barely know this guy.
You're like, enough of this, dude.
I've had enough of this. Yeah. I just okay. Come on now.
You're trying to be like the guy. I always say this. Like, have you ever been asked by people where they'll say, "Dude, do you just have Sports Center on in your house all day, every day?" Yeah. And I'm like, hell no. And I'm like, let me put it this way: if you sell insurance, all right, and there was a 24-hour-a-day insurance channel when you got home from work every day, would you turn that channel on? No. Hell no. No way you'd turn that thing on. So you were trying to be like between you and the two other individuals, right? What if one of them sold insurance and the other one was a general contractor, right?
Yeah.
You don't assume that they want to talk about that.
No.
Why does everybody always assume that we want to talk about
right?
Well,
these two guys are in wealth management. So guess what I want to talk about? Tell me how I can make money. I don't want to rank the top 10 quarterbacks in the ACC on my day off.
Right.
I want to tell me what I should invest in. How's crypto looking these days? I know Brady took a bath on it, but I've got other friends that say they made a lot of money on it. Yeah, Mike, we don't want to talk about that crap. What do you think? What do you think about the new NIL and the transfer portal? I'm like, oh my God, you're really going to do this to me? You're really going to do this to me at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night at a sports bar? But that's what I got lassoed into. And it actually was a semi-intelligent discussion that I want to bounce off you, and I'll get into that. Part of it has to do with the FSU Clemson litigation in the ACC. I know you do a lot of ACC games with your crew. You're all over the place. But I think this is the next potential avalanche. For a year plus, I talked about if Colorado makes that move, and I happen to do some games with a very informed former Colorado coach who told me before anybody else had it, Mike, it's going down. We are leaving. I said, what? And I knew that would pretty much be the death nail of the Pac-12, and it kind of was. The avalanche started, and everybody just started bolting left and right, and the rest is history. I think if the Florida State Clemson thing goes down, I really wonder what is the future of the ACC. Let's table that for just a while, because that's a whole segment in itself. We'll also have what's Luke's beef. Luke's will be coming in hot. There's always something that's bugging you, that's needling you, that's riding you, that's getting you fired up. You're a feisty guy. We'll get to that as well. I'm going to start with something completely off the board. We don't talk a ton of college basketball in here, but there's a story that involved college basketball that I think relates to college football in some respects. How many of us college football guys were following the Danny Hurley story? Because
I was familiar with it, but I wasn't tied to my phone on it.
Okay, well, he was offered $70 million to go to the Lakers, far more than UConn can pay. You're talking about the head basketball coach of the two-time defending national champions. And potentially, if he stayed, even though they're going to lose a couple of guys to the lottery, they might not be preseason number one. I think that's going to be Alabama, but they're going to be right up there. As a college football fan, I think you had an interest in this story because we all assume now, with Saban saying, "I'm gone. I'm not putting up with this crap." People like Jay Wright in basketball, Roy Williams in basketball. I've heard a number of baseball coaches recently talk about we have reached the utter nonsense zone where teams are poaching other players from other teams. So this is one where it was like, no offense to the Lakers, score one for the little guy, because typically speaking, I'll take it now to football. In the NFL, if the NFL really wants a guy, Spurrier left for the Redskins.
Sure.
At the time, they were the Redskins. Saban left for the Dolphins. right? I mean, there's if you want to go all the way back, Lou Holtz left for the Jets. Like there's Jimmy Johnson left for the Cowboys. There's a number of examples because the NFL money is still so great. And college football coaches. Now, if you're Kirby Smart, you're living in a pretty good neighborhood, right? I mean, you're getting the best players and you don't have to deal with the same amount of BS as a number of other Power 4 coaches. But for a lot of these guys, it's like, I've had it with this system. I'm going to go. So to me, it was encouraging to see one of the premier coaches in one of the two revenue sports say, no, I like college better. And while it is flawed, it's still better than the alternative. I'm going to take less money and I'm going to stay in UConn.
Yeah. So, I've thought a lot about this as it's related to football. And you're right, there's a correlation here with basketball. And with, the infusion of name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal. And by the way, both name, image, and likeness in the transfer portal in and of themselves is manageable. The problem is when you combine it. Mm-hmm. That's where you get the explosive issues, okay? Well, if we consider UConn right now to be on par with, let's just say, the equivalent of basketball's version of what Nick Saban built at Alabama, or basketball's version of what Kirby Smart has at Georgia, or what Dabo Swinney has at Clemson. If you're going to coach in college athletics, in order to deal with all of this and still have a legitimate shot at being a championship caliber program, you have to be at 7 to 8 programs, because they're the only programs that have the resources to navigate this space and to win at a high level. So from Dan Hurley's perspective, he's at one of those places in the basketball world. You look at all of these, a lot of these football coaches, you mentioned some baseball coaches, and I agree. I've talked to them as well, and they just shake their head, and they're just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Right? So what I've noticed is the older coaches, when I say older coaches, let's just say 45 and up, 50 and up, in the last 20 years of college athletics where you could truly generate wealth, okay? Because 35 years ago, you couldn't get rich as a coach, all right? That was the old saying, you ain't going to get rich coaching, right? Well, now you can. But it's the young guys. It's the GAs, the QCs, quality controls, graduate assistants, the ops guys, those types of guys that are having to deal with all of these auxiliary issues. They're sitting there going, why in the world would I ever get involved in college athletics? And so as a result, we're losing a lot of good, young, up-and-coming coaches that are going to the NFL because they don't want to deal with all this other nonsense. The old guys have more of a choice because they have some money in their pocket. They have their retirement set up. But those young guys are looking at this and saying, I'm out of here, man. I'm not doing this.
Yeah, I think there's no question that we're going to see more. Who do you think would be the first coach to bolt? Who do you think will be the next, I should say, premier coach to bolt for the pros? Not retirement necessarily. That would be usually an older coach. But maybe the next – I mean, you got guys like Lincoln Riley out there for a while. His name was
that's the first one that comes to mind, but his star is dropping a little bit.
You know who else his star has dropped that I would have mentioned as a leading candidate 3-4 years ago? Matt Campbell. I thought Matt Campbell was – I mean, he was rumored to be offered some NFL jobs. He stayed in Ames, Iowa.
I know. They got 21 starters back. And Rocco Beck's a dude at quarterback. They actually might be really good. So
you're bullish.
I think in a place like Iowa State, you're not sustaining 8, 9, 10 wins every year. You're going to have dips.
Right.
It's a developmental program. When you have upperclassmen leave or you have guys going to the transfer portal, those guys behind them they're a step below. And I don't mean that with a negative connotation. It's just the reality of that program and the type of players that they're accessing. But it's funny you bring them up because you're right. He was a huge hot commodity. I mean, look at this. Forget bolting. Look what Chip Kelly did.
Yeah.
I mean, Chip Kelly literally called out UCLA, and rightfully so, for not pushing all their chips to the center of the table and being truly willing to compete in this new world order of college football. And he's like, I'm not going into the Big Ten. I'm going out of a non-line of scrimmage league into a line of scrimmage league with bad elements in terms of weather.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a university that is going to be willing to do what SC is willing to do, what Washington's willing to do, what Ohio State's willing to do. I mean, that's big. But again, I go back to the money. He can financially afford to do that if he chooses to do it. If he just wants to recruit guys and coach ball, not have to worry about all the other stuff, he's got the financial, security to be able to do that. But I would say it would have been Lincoln Riley, but he's going to have to show that they can and are improved on defense, and quite honestly, that he cares, like that he truly is invested. I mean, you can say all you want about all of these offensive coaches out there, but there's one common denominator in the college football playoff every single year. The two teams playing for the national championship are the two best teams in the country up front. Just is what it is. And that's not SC on defense, and it wasn't Oklahoma on defense under his leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, but it hasn't been.
But why? There's a million, exaggerating a touch, there's several big-time defensive prospects in the state of California that probably grew up Southern Cal fans.
There's no linemen.
Are they not getting them?
So, a couple of things. Talk a little bit about our population numbers here. So everybody talks about the three biggest states in recruiting: Florida, Texas, and California. And I immediately say, nope. Florida, Texas, and Georgia. People say, how can that be? California has 38 million people. They may very well have 38 million people. Close to 60% is Hispanic or Asian background. Guess which two demographics don't play football? So when you look at the numbers, yes, the population of the state is, but the football population of the state is not. Your football playing population of the state is white, Polynesian, and African American. Okay. Also, and I don't know why this is. I don't know if anybody really truly knows why this is. But I had a long conversation with Mike Bellotti about this. And you're right in what you were saying about SC. He goes, in the old days, and my dad used to say this because my dad coached in the Pac-10 for a bunch of years. He'd say if SC wanted a guy on the West Coast and he was a great player, they were getting him, and you had to go get somebody else. That was it. And Mike Bellotti goes, the only lineman that we recruited and signed to Oregon that could even played for SC was Haloti Ngata. We couldn't get the guy, right? Well, the problem is, let's just say you're a 7-year-old kid. Let's go back 12 years. All right, go back 12 years, and you're a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid. And you're growing up. Who are the dominant forces in college football that you are seeing thrown in your face everywhere? Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Florida. Michigan hadn't quite gotten there yet. Texas A&M, LSU. Talk about teams that won college football playoff, won a national championship. So all of those kids on the West Coast, they don't identify with SC the way they used to.
Right.
Now that can change now because there's variables involved where you can lure kids through the transfer portal, through name, image, and likeness, and SC has those resources. But just to point out a couple of those names, where's Tua from?
California. No, Hawaii. Sorry.
Where's DJ from?
Hawaii.
Where's CJ Stroud from?
CJ, is he a California kid?
California.
Yeah.
Where's Bryce Young from?
California.
All right. I can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And that's the issue, is those guys would normally have gone to one place.
Right.
They'd gone to SC, right? And so you take that and then you couple the lack of big men for whatever reason, like Kayvon Thibodeau, right? The year he came out of high school, on average, there's 4 to 5 Kayvon Thibodeau types coming out of the Southeast every year. There's one Kayvon Thibodeau coming out of California once every 4 years.
And he goes to Oregon.
And then he didn't go to SC. Exactly. So it's a different climate out there. It's a different world. I'll tell you, participation in football has gone down out there.
Yeah.
And so you don't have the numbers that are playing as much anymore. It's fascinating. I mean, we always look at the general consensus of our national consensus every 4 years.
Mm.
And it's really interesting to see, like, if you go back into the 70s and 80s, and then you look at the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and you look at the state of the state of Pennsylvania. Remember when we all grew up in the 80s, and the state of Pennsylvania was just like, that was iron football, some of the best football in
best
the country, best quarterbacks, the whole 9 yards. Well, there was a drop in the economy, in the workforce, and a lot of the mills and the plants
Right.
and all those places shut down. Where did people go? They went south. For better weather and lower cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, the South now, starting in the late 80s, early 90s, almost kind of coinciding with when the SEC created the two sides of the conference, the Southeast has exploded. You look at the population of the Southeast, just say Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida over the last 25 years has boomed. And that's why you have all the best football players there.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, just living in Atlanta for the last 12, 13 years, high school football is ingrained in everything.
Oh.
Games are televised every week. Everybody knows every high school program. The facilities are unbelievable. The coaches' salaries are unbelievable. And then in the last few years, I've been in California a number of times to call NFL games, and you're in LA or you're in San Francisco or Santa Clara is basically where they're located now. And you turn on the radio, you read the sports page, you talk to people, and it's like college football doesn't even exist. It's just a
in-season event. It's an in-season event.
It's an in-season event, and I can't. I've talked about this before. And by the way, Craig brings up a good point, and I was going to say that too. If Nico lights it up at Tennessee, that's another one that's going to hurt.
Oh, that's another California
Southern Cal fans because he's a California kid.
Yeah.
I really believe when pro football entered California again, and you now have two teams right there, I think that took away from Southern Cal. Southern Cal was their pro team. Pete Carroll saw an opportunity. There was no football in L.A., no NFL football in L.A., and so you had all the celebrities that normally would be on the sideline for an NFL game. They're on the sideline for a Southern Cal game. Well, now it's back to an NFL town. You go to L.A., it is all NFL all the time, and Lakers.
Yeah,
just and some Dodgers.
Just pro sports town. It's like
it's a pro sports town, yeah. And so the culture is, in addition to everything you mentioned with the migration and the demographics not being in favor of those schools, everything else got them there, hurts them there as well. Whereas states like Georgia and Florida and the smaller states in the Southeast and the Sun Belt, I mean, it is the emphasis on high school football is immense. Yeah. It's absolutely
year round.
Absolutely. By the way, you mentioned Chip Kelly. Let's not forget, Chip Kelly is probably the last premier guy to leave for the NFL. Forget about leaving for an offensive coordinator job. He left for the Eagles, and it wasn't awful. He had a player kind of sell him down the river, and I don't think he ever recovered from that. And his personality is not one that is necessarily warm and fuzzy. More of an introvert in a lot of ways. But I don't know who's going to be the next shoe to drop, because Lincoln Riley's stock has gone down, and some of the other guys that were riding high, like a Campbell, have gone down. And then now the money is so immense. You know, how many $10 million we're no longer going to even raise an eyebrow at that. If you're a premier coach at a premier program, we're going to be like, 10, that's the baseline. Like he better be in 8 figures. Otherwise you're not getting the job done, raising enough money and not using your TV money properly. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that materializes down the road, because with Hurley saying no, I don't think any of us thought he was going to be able to say no, because we knew it was going to be more money than UConn could ever offer. And like every other coach, and Hurley's a straight up guy now. He's like, I don't tell parents what they want to hear. I actually judge a kid sometimes on his parents, and if I sense
Absolutely.
if there's one of those helicopter dads, if there's I don't want you, don't need you. In basketball, you can get away with that because it's not the team with the most pro draft picks that wins the title. In fact, it never is. Otherwise, Calipari would have had 12 titles at Kentucky.
Right.
In football, however,
85 guys.
It's 85 guys, and if you're not stockpiling elite talent, even with an expanded playoff, like I'm really happy that we're going to have more teams in the playoff now, and it's not just going to be the cabal, as JC and I talk about a number of times, with the same, 4 or 5 teams competing for the 14 playoff every year. So now we're going to have 12, which is great. But in terms of who's going to actually have enough depth, talent,
it's going to be the same 4 teams.
It's going to be the same 4 teams. Like we're not
all
changing
we're doing
much.
is all we are doing is taking a long winding road to get there, and in between we're giving everybody else more football, and that is fantastic, and we all love it. But the reality is, to have the roster to run that gauntlet, all right, and to go the entire distance, even if you are a team with a bye. There's 5 to 7 teams in college football built that way. Maybe 4 to 6. Okay. So those other teams, they get one wrong injury. They get tired late, and they're like the 11th seed or the 10th seed. They're toast. You might see a couple of wins, but then after that, it's going to be a whole different ballgame.
I think the good news, if you're fortunate enough to get to a playoff, even though you have no chance to, and I'm not just talking about the Group 5 automatic, I'm talking about some other teams that are going to get in there.
Yeah.
You almost have to look at that like a team does a Final Four in basketball. Maybe they get smoked in the semifinals by 30 points. You know what? You still put up a banner. We made the Final Four in 2024. We made the Final Four.
College football playoff participant.
Exactly. Like that. That's going to have to be the new. It's not going to be like, hey, we won the Outback Bowl. Yay. It's going to be like, holy crap, we were a playoff team that year. Because chances are, if you're fortunate enough, like you make 1 out of every 10 years, you make a playoff, you're not going to win this thing. The depth is going to be more important than ever, and the depth is on the side of the same 4 or 5 schools. We'll get into that more. After we take a timeout, Luke's is coming off the top rope. He's coming in hot. He's got a beef. He's always got a little bit of something that's stuck in his craw that's just needling him. We'll also talk about some of the other things going on in an ever-changing universe of college football. He is Tom Luginbill of ESPN. I'm Mike Morgan. It's JC and Morgan back after a quick timeout.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCGinc.com. That's TitanCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit siteprorentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
It is JC and Morgan, episode number 244. You can check out the website, jcandmorgan.com. We are on every platform imaginable, from YouTube to Spotify, iTunes to Facebook and Twitter, and everything in between. Again, JC is out today. Tom Luginbill, our friend of the program, joining us on site in the Queen City, right? That's where you are.
I'm at the lake right now.
Oh.
I'm driving back to the Queen City today, though.
You looked like a Kennedy yesterday. Tom is sending me pictures, smoking a cigar on like this fancy wooden boat. I was just ready for you to go to the Kennedy compound, drink some bourbon, and ham it up with all the dignitaries in Palm Beach or something.
So I got to tell you, man, and I'm not gonna lie. I'm a water guy. Like
am I.
I water ski, love jet skis, love boating, love just floating off the dock, the whole 9 yards. But down here in this time of year, not every day, but a lot of the days, if I'm down here, I can take my hotspot, my portable little power unit, my laptop, all right, and my cell phone, and take my boat out, go beach it up on a little island, pop my little umbrella in my chair, and literally do everything I do for work from that spot.
That's a beautiful thing.
I mean,
that's a beautiful thing.
You cannot beat it, right?
No.
And so in our job, and you know this, and you know it even more than I do, because you're doing multiple sports and I'm just doing football. But let's just speak football for a second. When it's about the first or second week of August, from that point to, for me, the first Wednesday in February, but really a couple of days after the national championship game, everything is scheduled for us. Like, we don't control our schedule. Like, you go here to do this game, you're on this show at this time, and you're going to do this radio show at this time, boom, boom, boom. But this time of year, outside of probably, the UFL and then some camps and combines I got to do for recruiting, sometimes during the summer, when I'm not doing those things, I can pretty much be anywhere.
Right.
To get the job done. So I don't know about you, but like when those opportunities happen, because we are so bogged down in the football season, I take advantage every single time.
Oh, heck yeah. Absolutely. No, I spend a lot of time, I call it Studio South in South Florida. A lot of beach time, a lot of lake time.
I hear you, brother. I hear you.
I am a water baby. I think that's why our favorite movie is Jaws, because I watch it 1,000. It's not just it's written well, it's well acted. It's also on the water almost the entire freaking movie. So it's like, okay, I feel at home with this. Other than the sharks, which, by the way, if you are in Walton County and you're going to 30A and you're going to Destin and Panama City, I don't know where all the bull sharks are coming from. I see them on the other side in the Atlantic. They're all over the place. We got a shark problem, folks.
So what?
I'm just
I'm not going through that hell again.
What? Yeah,
I'm not going through that hell again.
I know what a shark looks like, and I've been there. I'm not going through it again.
Big.
It might be a barracuda there, Chief. You don't know.
So I actually saw something, speaking of my beef coming up, and this is related to social media, but I saw something on Instagram this morning in Fort Walton County and that whole area is the fish that the bull sharks and the tiger sharks feed on, for whatever reason, are coming in closer and closer
Is that
to the
tarpon?
shore. No, they're like this big.
Okay.
They're not big, but when they swim, they're kind of translucent. They almost look clear a little bit, this and that.
Yeah.
And you'd only be able to see them in like Florida type water. So, but apparently they come in their little schools of 10 to 15 or whatever. But normally they do that, 20, 30 yards off the beach. They're not doing that lately, apparently. They don't know why. So,
well, it's going on. It's going on big time in the Gulf. I was paddleboarding in the Atlantic down near Jupiter, and I swear to you, I saw a massive shadow come toward me underneath and just kind of swimming serpentine.
yeah.
And I saw it, and I lost my breath for like 5 seconds, and then he went away, and I was like, "Yeah, I think it's time to put the paddleboard up. I think we've done enough. We've done enough damage here. Let's go ahead and get back to sand."
You got to remember, anytime you go in the ocean, you are the visiting team.
Okay, now this is my beef. Okay, I'm not saying we should go out and kill a bunch of sharks, but I am saying
let's diminish the population a little bit.
Yeah, like we could lose a few. Like whenever I see these stories on, they're all over Instagram and Twitter, and it's videos of these sharks all over and people vacationing in the Gulf and up in whatever beach is your choice. Could be South Carolina, North Carolina. There was a huge shark spotted on the Outer Banks of North Carolina 2 days ago. And there's always remember now, you're just a visitor. This is their home. I tell that to the two girls that just lost limbs. Yeah. They were in, waist deep water. Can we have a little more sympathy for the human beings that have been crippled or in some cases killed than we have for the million sharks in the ocean? I'm just saying, last time I checked, we are the highest thing on the food chain. So there's my beef, Tom. I'm telling you, I am not here to make sharks extinct, but they are nowhere close to extinction. They're everywhere. And people, I think it's okay to enjoy the beach and not be in fear of something chewing your legs off. So yeah, I'm okay with a little bit of shark control because basically they are protected species. Meanwhile, we are gutting the oceans of tuna because we love sushi and other game fish. That's the other theory I've heard. We have like 80% less of the fish type certain fish.
Sharks are looking for new food.
So sharks are like, well, you just took my food supply. So I'm not saying it's not our fault, perhaps. Not saying it's not our fault, but I am saying maybe we could just take Chief Brody out there, give him a gun. If he wants to shoot a couple down, it's going to be okay, folks. We're still going to have plenty of sharks, I promise you. That's all I'm saying. I'm sure that'll be a very popular take with PETA, and I'll get letters and emails and everything else. All right, we have a fancy setup for Tom Luginbill's beef, which has nothing to do with Aqua Life or anything else. Our producer is the Mad Dog, Phil Molinax, and he will now set it up perfectly.
Time to let loose all that internal frustration. Air those grievances. Ladies and gentlemen, what's your beef?
There you go, Lugs. High production for this segment.
No, it's high production value right there. Seriously, well,
you don't get that just anywhere. Yeah, that's Gary. I whenever I need a liner or reader, I reach out to him. He's got the perfect sports radio, whatever pipes, and we don't pay him a whole lot of money to do it. So we're very thankful for Gary. Thank you, Gary.
All right, so here's my beef. And then I fully acknowledge the cesspool that is social media, the dangers of it, the cowardice of it, and the fact that everybody now thinks that they have a voice, and most of them think they have a voice that matters on subjects they have no idea what they're talking about. While at the same time, I fully acknowledge that you and I and many of us that are in this profession know that we are neck deep in that cesspool because everything we do or say becomes very, very public. All right. But my biggest beef is if you are such a coward on social media that your handle name is like an 18-digit or character combination of letters and numbers, and you have no photo for your profile and you're running your mouth Like, literally, how pathetic of a person do you have to be? Like, I can somewhat respect the guy with a full-blown description, full name, has his location in his profile, his picture, and he comes after you, and he comes after you hard. And I get it. We get that all the time. Knowing full well that if I probably met that individual in person, their response, he'd buy me a beer, come up, shake my blah, 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 right?
Yes.
But these guys aren't even brave enough to actually have a legitimate identity on their account.
Right.
Like, that part just drives me absolutely crazy. So yesterday, I noticed this yesterday on TikTok. I released 2 60-minute little quips on Monday and Tuesday, right? That I knew would get a rise out of some people. Okay. One was about NIL, and one was about kids when they get invited to college camps. So I knew that the response to it would probably be 70-30 in favor of what I was saying, which it turned out to be. I would say the 30%, though, were all people whose handles were just like I described.
Right. Jimmy J 014727-5.
Yes. Yeah, with the egg in the photo, whatever.
With the egg in the photo, and his real name is not even Jimmy, and his last initial isn't J.
Yeah.
It's
why are you even on there?
Sid Farkas.
Like, what are you doing? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah. No, you just described. I mean, that's not just in our space. That's social media in general.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The people with the most aggressive takes, like going after people, it's always somebody without a real name, without a location, with a bunch of digits, without a photo, without a location. Basement. Right. Yep. Yeah, it's yes. There's
flexing
no
their
question.
Twitter muscles.
Right. Oh yeah. There's nothing worse than Twitter tough guy.
Oh,
nothing worse than Twitter.
That's why it's such a cesspool. It is such a just disgusting avenue that we have all found ourselves locked into.
Well, and it's a shame because overall, I think it's a great thing. I think it can be a really good thing. It can be a very interesting, like a town square with differing opinions and whatnot.
Sure.
But it's like anything else in the world. All it takes is a couple of bad eggs to kind of screw the whole thing up. I mean,
and those bad eggs multiply rapidly.
They multiply rapidly. And when it comes to college football fans, the most passionate group on the bunch, those eggs can multiply like gremlins when you put the water on them.
Right. So, like, I'm a big accountability guy, and I think that's my biggest beef with social media. Nobody has to be accountable on it. We do.
Yeah. Right.
But nobody else does.
Yeah. Yeah, we get called to the carpet. I mean, I have to think. My rule of thumb is anything that I hit send on, I've got to think it through at least 3 times.
Absolutely.
And how is it going to stand up 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So there's a number of things.
Get a call or email from somebody.
No question. And you and I have had enough coworkers that have had that happen.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, so far that hasn't been the case, but it's always possible. So you want to be engaged, but you got a different set of standards or rules than again Donnie in his basement. Ma, where's the meatloaf? Slightly different protocol on that one. SEC meetings in Destin. Did you get anything out of it?
Not really. I guess I kind of feel like there are so many unknown variables, right, that are still going on in college athletics, problems that we're nowhere near close to finding solutions to, that the SEC, they may be in a power position, but they don't have any of the answers either. And neither does the Big Ten, and neither does the ACC. And until we start getting, I think, some real clarity on, and it doesn't, I understand what the federal government's doing, and I understand Congress, and I understand the buyout, and I understand, all of the revenue sharing stuff and this and that, but we still don't have enough answers to that either. Mm-hmm. Until you figure out whether Title IX is looked at as an opportunity issue or a compensation issue, which it's not, but that's going to be settled in court, and that's going to take a long time to settle in court, because with the SEC meetings, whether it's football, whatever they're specifically meeting about, every decision they make has a significant impact on everything else. The trickle-down effect is huge. Because what if, and I'm not saying this will happen because I don't think it will happen, what if this revenue sharing deal and goes to court on the Title IX side of it, and they decide that Title IX should be involved in the compensation model? Well, goodbye to men's Olympic sports. Because you're not going to be able to cut the women's. Yeah. I mean, men's swimming, men's diving, men's golf, men's track, all of the ones that bring in, or basically in the red, okay? Because you're not going to be able to, if you do that, you can't touch Title IX. You can't touch the women's sports. So I think that's going to be very fascinating. And again, we're not there yet. We don't know.
No. Somebody asked me on a show, where do you think this is going to be decided? And I said, a courtroom. I don't think this is where Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, the two most powerful people in the sport, they don't have any authority here.
No.
They can voice their opinion. Congress is not going to get anything done. There's a lot of stuff going on, in case you haven't noticed, in the world of politics. They're not going to agree on anything, nor are they going to spend valuable time on it. This is going to go to a courtroom. And the analogy I made, Lugs, and if you include, because we're going to raise scholarship roster sizes, maybe not in football, it might stay at 85, but in other sports like a baseball, it's not going to be 11.7 anymore. Other sports might have padded. And it was estimated initially $20 million per school per year. I would say it's closer to 25, but let's just meet in the middle and say 22.
Yeah.
Every athletic director in the SEC, the Big Ten, et cetera, just got handed a $22 million a year invoice. Now, I know we all like to think that it's a bottomless pit of money and you just turn on the spigot and it just shoots out like those little machines you see now at bachelor parties and stuff, like that shoots out $100 bills and just never stop. Nope, that's not the case. We were a COVID season away, had the Greg Sankeys of the world not salvaged the season, of schools being in the red. They had to borrow money anyway. They had to borrow money against time. If you all of a sudden add a $22.5 million invoice to every school, and then the Title IX lawsuit says, well, half of that has to go to the women's basketball program losing $4.5 million.
Yeah.
This program losing $2 million, that program losing. Well, now all of a sudden you find yourself, some schools, again, we're not talking Ohio State and we're not talking Georgia, but a lot of other schools, even Power 4 schools, are going to be like, how are we going to make this work and still be competitive in the sport of college football? I think there's a lot of people biting their fingernails over that right now.
Did I share with you the comments Jamie Pollard made, the Iowa State athletic director, in regards to this news? So this is the way he phrased it. This was really interesting. So they are on the verge of embarking on a brand new state-of-the-art wrestling facility. Okay.
Which is huge in that state.
Correct. So he finds out this news, and I'm paraphrasing his direct quote here, but he essentially says, okay, if we were to just put this in simple economic terms and assume that our athletic budget to run our athletic department is $100 million. Basically, now our athletic budget is $80 million or $78 million.
Right.
So we're not starting on that wrestling building.
Yeah.
That's got to go on the back burner now. And it's those exact things like you were just mentioning. You can't, when one sport makes 85% of the revenue, you can't give half of the proceeds to sports in the red. It's got to be scaled. It has to be. I don't care if you're black, white, purple, yellow, green, male, female, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't survive that model.
I think I think it's going to be fascinating how that comes down. And that's really, we'd have answers to almost every question right now if it wasn't for the Title IX litigation that seems to be inevitable.
Well,
all right,
real quick, what we don't have answers to, though, we don't have answers at all to how we're going to deal with name, image, and likeness in recruiting.
I want to ask you about that too.
And we don't have answers to tampering either.
Yeah, I want to ask you about those two things. I want to run back that conversation I had with Seminole Sean and Boilermaker Kenny as well, because it pertains to a lot of the issues going on. Bigger picture in college football. Final break, and we'll come back. We'll also do a little fiver dimer with our friend Lugs here on JC and Morgan.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit siteprorentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
All right, final segment of JC and Morgan. Tom Luginbill sitting in with us, friend of the program throughout the duration. Our producer is Phil Molinax, the Mad Dog. We are presented in part by SitePro Rentals. When renting equipment, important to have local, easy to do business with friends in the industry. When reliability, service, transparent pricing matter, you need to use SitePro Rentals. Easy to do business with professionals, ready for better equipment rental. Call our friends at SitePro at 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-RENT-NOW. Lugs, you were talking about kind of the consequences of everything going on as it pertains to NIL.
Is that a question?
Well, it was a setup. I was throwing you the lob pass, and I was ready for you to just sky to the rim and slam it home. In other words, this is the question I think came up the most. When some people heard about this, again, this $22 million invoice that people listening right now, your favorite program just got handed a $22 million a year bill. And no matter how much money you make, that's going to take its toll. Some people thought, oh, okay, well, that's where the NIL is. No. The NIL, correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, you might have a different opinion. But based on what I can see, it's not going anywhere. Collectives, NIL, not going anywhere. So you're still paying players out of that, and we still have an issue of, are we buying recruits? Because it certainly seems like that kind of stuff goes on.
Yeah, well, we are in a pay-for-play model. We're not only in a pay-for-play model with the current college athlete, but we're certainly in one in recruiting. And it was never intended to be that in any way, shape, or form. And I don't know. I understand the revenue sharing portion of it and that everybody's going to get their piece. But to your point, the collective is not going away, because the collective, whether it stays as an outside arm or it gets brought in-house by the university, is going to be the vehicle that helps athletes go get name, image, and likeness deals above and beyond what their revenue share is, right? Which there's nobody that's against that. See, I think that's the one thing that pisses me off about all of this. Everybody thinks that coaches are against name, image, and likeness.
Right.
They're not against name, image, and likeness. What they're against is something for nothing, a one-way street, all right, and not having to earn it. That's what coaches are frustrated with. We're sitting here talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to a high school kid who's highly likely not to pan out. Highly likely. Okay? And that high school kid has done nothing to earn that money. Like if you're going, to me, name, image, and likeness is based upon value. How do you generate value and marketability? You perform. Right? So like, do you think Nick Saban ever had an issue with Bryce Young in every NIL deal he got? Hell no, because he went out and performed, man. He earned every penny, and by goodness, go out and get all you can. What the coaches are concerned about is all this money's being thrown around, and there's nothing required in return because they're not employees, right? So you can't put performance standards in their contracts. Right? You can't put morality clauses in the contract. All of these different things are a problem, and nobody has any answers for it because they just dumped it on the lap of everybody and said, you deal with it. Well, not everybody's equipped to deal with it. Like you said, it may not be as hard of a deal for Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama, but it is for Kansas State, right? It is for Oregon State. It is for the University of Arizona. We're not comparing apples and apples here. So I think the name, image, and likeness part, as I mentioned, fine. Transfer portal part, I wish it was a little more streamlined, fine. But you put them together and you have a bomb that has created and wreaked utter havoc in college athletics.
I don't think there's any question. And on top of that, if you know, the battle cry among some players is, well, we want to be treated like the pros do. Well, in the pros, when you get paid, you don't get to just bolt a year later for somebody that pays you an extra $75,000. You have to honor a contract. That's how it works in the quote unquote real world that you want to live in. Yeah. So if you want to live in the real world, then you can't just bolt whenever you decide you're either unhappy or, again, someone's offering you an extra $75,000. Like that's not the real world. It's not the way it works in the NFL.
No, I mean, that would be the equivalent of Patrick Mahomes each and every year, just going and shopping himself around, the highest bidder. Right. And so what does that do to a team? What does that do to a franchise? What does that do to an organization? I think it tears it to shreds because it wouldn't be just one guy. It's bunches of guys like we're seeing right now. There's a reason the NFL exists in the model that it does, because they collectively bargained and came to an agreement that they all agreed upon, franchise, ownership, players union. And so it's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. And how about this? You know why an NFL player, when it's week 11 and their team's eliminated from the playoffs, doesn't just sit out? Because he can't.
Got to honor the contract.
You have to. Yeah. So whatever we do going forward with a lot of this stuff, we need to force players to play in bowl games, right? Play in college football playoff games, all right? Yeah. You fulfill your end of the bargain. That's the thing. And by the way, if you fulfill your end of the bargain, the name, image, and likeness stuff, if you're any good, it's going to happen on its own.
Right.
It's going to come. If you go out and you perform to this ridiculous level, even if you perform to a good level, there are going to be people that will want to go into business with you.
I also think it's wrong to assume, I've heard this a number of times, yeah, well, players will opt out of the other bowl games, but they were never opt out of a playoff. Oh, really? I'm a projected first-round draft pick. I'm the number 10 seed in a playoff. If I want to make a run, I've got to play 3-4 games, or I can just go to and work with a personal trainer and get ready for the combine to shave a tenth of a second off the 40 times so I can make an extra few $1 million. There's going to be opt-outs, even for playoff teams, if you leave it the way if that money has already been cashed. And I don't know, there's no uniformity. So every school can structure it a different way. And some people might say, well, Mike, Lugs, isn't it up to the school to make sure that the contract that you get paid at the end of the season, when you basically honor your commitment, as opposed to, say, the beginning and the middle? That would be technically the logical thing to do. But here's where that becomes a problem with no guardrails. If I'm school X and I'm saying, Well, the only way you're going to get that full payment is if you play the 12 games and the bowl game, and that's when you get compensated. Or school Y that says, yeah, look, we're not so uptight about that. You're going to get paid early. We want you to get that sports car early, and so we're going to front load it. We're not going to make you wait.
Which one's the real world?
The real world is why the real world.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, the
It's
real
X.
world in the real world, it's X. But in college football, where you're pandering to the top players in the portal and in recruiting, it becomes Y, because if you think that's going to be the difference between landing the kid and not landing the kid, a lot of schools, quite frankly, will bend over backwards and do what is not economically logical.
Yep.
And so that is where we are.
Mike, real quick, I got one scenario for you. If it hasn't happened yet, how long do you think it's going to be till it does? Okay. Got a high-profile recruit out of high school. He gets some NIL money. Good player in college. Earns more NIL money. Doesn't have a lot of support. Doesn't have a lot of structure. All right. Decides to make a bad decision to declare early for the NFL draft. Okay. Doesn't get drafted, or gets drafted in like the 7th round. Doesn't make a roster. He's blown all of his NIL money in this world, in this, I guess you could say, hierarchy of income that 18 to 22-year-olds until now have never, ever experienced, nor are they prepared really to handle it, right? And now that individual is left with no college degree, no money, and oh, by the way, now you got to go out in the workforce and take a job for $35,000 or $29,000 or $40,000. It's going to happen. If it hadn't happened already, it's going to happen. It's going to happen more than once.
No question. There's so many easy fits. I do think, I've said this for years, and I don't know why. I must be flat out wrong, because I don't see anybody else pointing this out from a legal standpoint or an accounting standpoint. I'm convinced there's obvious resistance to calling them employees. I mean, that's obvious, right? That is clearly transparent. They will cave into almost anything but calling them employees, because at that point you got to pay taxes. And I'm not just talking about the student athletes. Remember now, these universities that are getting $100 million, let's just say in TV revenue, like the Big Ten is, like the SEC will eventually, you're not paying taxes on that.
I know.
You're not paying. It's a tax-free enterprise because it's under the education designation. If you start calling them employees, are you going to be able to avoid that? Are you going to be able to avoid paying taxes? At that point, it's a pure business. It's a pure pro model. So I truly, and nobody talks about this. I truly believe the reason that they are doing everything in their power to stay away from that designation is because you want to talk about the party really ending. Go ahead and make them pay 38% of that $100 million in taxes. And now that is the ultimate game changer, more than any.
Oh, by the way, that's just for the universities. What do you start telling the players? Okay, well, here's your scholarship. That's protected. But everything else now is going to be taxed to the federal and state government.
Right. Yeah.
Now what are you going to do?
Yeah. That allowance you get for your living quarters, the money you get for food, the money you get for incidentals, that's all going to be taxed now. So, I mean, nobody wants that. I actually this is how nerdy I got the other day. I read up on Sherman antitrust exemption, which exists in Major League Baseball and the NFL, but that's what they're fighting for right now in college athletics, is to get that same. But what that was designed for was to avoid monopolies. You know, you had the Rockefellers and whatnot, and they basically owned the market. It was like a true cabal. And what it was designed to do was to spread the wealth a little bit, right? So people had more competition. Well, everything that we're doing right now in college football is the antithesis of that. It's counterintuitive, because we are just setting up a situation where there's only going to be a few schools that can truly financially compete with these new structures in place, and everybody else is going to be lagging behind. I mean, I think about like schools in the ACC and the Big 12, and this leads me into my conversation with Seminole Sean and Boilermaker Kenny. So this goes on at the bar, and Kenny is fired up because Sean is saying it's a done deal, and Sean gives a lot of money to Florida State. He knows a thing or two. He's not just a Joe message board fan. He believes that, and this is actually documented, Florida State is spending a ton of money to figure out ways to get out of this contract, right? And
of course they are.
Yeah, and then Clemson pretty much following suit. Although I always get the sense that Clemson's like, you jump in the water first, we're right behind you. We're right behind you. Go ahead.
They're very quiet about what they're doing. Florida
Correct.
State was shouting to the rooftops.
Florida State is yelling from the highest mountains, and they're talking about private equity. They're talking about everything. But there's no question both of them desperately want out of the ACC. Desperately. And they seem determined to do it. I've always pointed out for the last few years, after every Tom, Dick, and Harry goes, my sources are telling me FSU and Clemson are gone, and then it never happens. Well, now they're playing the long game. They're like, this might take a few years, and we're going to have to spend a lot of money. But
talking about $400 or $500 million, probably.
Oh, a $500 million, yes.
Yeah.
$500 million is the price tag. But they believe they can find the money to do it, and in the long term, it's worth it because you are looking at a double the money in rights revenues for the SEC and Big Ten. I'm talking down the road now. I think it's already like 40 million more, something like that. Mm-hmm. It's going to be double. And if you're in the ACC, and we'll see how the Big 12 deal, winds up. I'm not convinced they're done with teams at this point. That you just can't compete at that point. You can't compete when your rivals have that much more in the way of resources. So this is going back and forth. And Kenny, Mr. Big Ten fan, he's still chapped about the fact that they added schools like Rutgers. He's like, who wants to go to Piscataway for a game? I'm like, well, that was all about getting the New York market. And what New York market? I could not reason with him. And again,
it's why Missouri's in the SEC.
It's why Missouri's in the SEC.
Yeah, Kansas City market.
But when you're 9 high noons in, it's hard to reason with somebody who, and he's a little bit older than us, and he wants the college football that was geographically inclined the way it used to be, and everything made sense on that nice, beautiful map, and he just doesn't get it. And Sean is saying, I think we're going to the Big Ten. Done deal. SEC, go ahead. Take North Carolina, Virginia. We'll be happy to go to the Big Ten. Do I want to go to West Lafayette? No, but I will gladly go to Ann Arbor, Columbus, and I'll gladly play some of the best teams out there, and I'll gladly take that big paycheck and get out of the ACC. And this is going on and on and on. And then Kenny's like, well, the Big Ten, we got more money than anybody. And then I have to intervene and go, well, that's not always going to be the case. The SEC, with the new deal, like you're not head and shoulders above everybody anymore. And it's a circular argument. It's going round and round and round. But the point is, it's so indicative of where college football fans are now. They're not just worried about the depth chart. They're worried about, if you're an SEC fan listening, you're like, I don't know worry about any of this. I put my head on the pillow every night and everything's cool. If you're a Big Ten fan, Kenny feels good about being in the Big Ten, but he also is like, man, I don't want this conference to go all the way from Tallahassee to Piscataway to Eugene, Oregon. Like, well, that's where it's going, brother. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You are the new Conference USA. So what do you think, just in encapsulating all that, what do you think we're looking at here?
So, number one, I think it was really smart for the ACC to go get SMU, Cal, and Stanford for no other reason than to expand the brand coast to coast, big markets. Okay? That I think was smart. Right now, SMU's a walk-on, right? They're paying their own way.
Yeah.
So that was just a bonus deal, I guess, if you're the commissioner, Jim Phillips. Now, this is all about survival, right? And when I hear all of this talk about Florida State or Clemson, nobody's ever asking, do they have an invitation to go somewhere? Has anybody gone to them and said, we will take you? As of now, the answer to that question is no. Here's the question you got to ask yourself if you're Florida State. If you're willing to put up all this money and spend all of this money and you don't get a favorable court ruling, then what are you going to do? Like, what if you pay $120 million to exit? They can do that now, okay? But then you go into a 3 or 4 or 5 year deal costing $400, $500, $600 million, and you don't win.
It would be devastating.
It could demolish their entire university.
I mean, it would really put them behind the 8 ball. Now, I
Yeah.
have to think that they have hired some really good counsel, both of these schools.
Well, of course. Yeah.
And they know that it's going to cost a lot and it's going to hurt, but they're going to get out. They're going to get out of
Maybe
the
they
deal.
will. Do you think, though, on the other end, the long game is just to bleed them dry?
The long game by who? The league?
Yeah.
It seems I want to believe that the league is just saying that eventually these two sides are going to go to the table and say, okay, let's talk about settlement.
Yeah.
This is War of the Roses. It's Michael Keaton. It's Kathleen Turner. You can't live under the same roof.
Michael Douglas. Come on, man.
Did I say Michael Keaton? I'm sorry. Michael Douglas. That's my bad. Party foul. Party foul. And you're living under the same roof. You don't want to be. You're not sleeping in the same bed. The moment you share the kitchen, a fight breaks out. I thought you said it was decaf. Yeah, it's just a toxic relationship. Let's go ahead. Let's cut up the records. And in the case of the schools, you're going to have to pay a massive amount of money, and that'll pave the way. But the other side of that coin is that the ACC is thinking, if they leave, we are utterly blanked.
Yeah.
What is this league if we lose the two remaining closest to a football power schools? Some might say Miami. Maybe Miami gets back there, but they're not there yet. We'll see on August 31st if they can start with a win against Florida. I just wonder if the ACC's it's not about principle anymore. It's about survival. And they just know that if they cave, no amount of money is going to make up for the fact that their league is going to dissolve. It's going to be like Kleofkoff on the Titanic, ordering another drink and telling the band what to play as the ship is getting submerged into the Atlantic. So I don't think they're going to cave willingly unless they have a true fallback plan. And I agree with you. Adding those 3 schools, while it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense geographically, and while it doesn't necessarily, it's not the most prestigious schools or brands in football, but it made sense. You need to start doing some backfill in the event you lose these 2 programs.
No doubt.
But I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. But it's going to be fascinating. One more thing before we get to Five or Dimer. The playoff dates have been announced. The TV, obviously a new landscape. Some might say, well, I'm sure you two guys are happy about it. That's who signs your paychecks. All honesty, I mean, I think from a scheduling standpoint, people just want to know times faster so they can plan accordingly.
Sure.
And then the college football playoff dates. Any thoughts about all that? All the scheduling things that we're looking at now that'll be unique in 2024.
I mean, no. Other than the fact that it doesn't change. It really doesn't change the schedule of the programs, right? Because whatever date the game is, they know it. So it'd be no different than, like, right now we know what the Gasparilla Bowl is. All right, so you know what that date is, and you know when you got to play. So I didn't see anything that jumped out. I don't think you can always please everybody from a scheduling standpoint where, all right, do we bump it up earlier? Do we push it back further? How far back do we want this to go? So on and so forth. There's only so many days in a month, right? There's only so many weekends. There's only so many opportunities where you can do this. And it's not like basketball where you can, play multiple games in a week and come out unscathed. So this is tricky. And I think you got to look to the FCS model a little bit. I thought they've done a really good job. And then they give themselves that break at the end, and they go almost 2 weeks before the championship game. Because like we were talking about in the first segment, man, it's going to be a battle of attrition, and not everybody's going to be built for it.
Right. It's on average in the early rounds, about 10 days between games, about a week and a half.
Yeah.
So
which is good.
I don't think you could have done that much better.
No,
honestly,
I don't think you could have either. Yeah.
I mean, there's only so many. You can't stretch out this schedule only so far. So
Right.
I think they did about as good a job as they can
Mm-hmm.
with it, and I am excited about knowing in the case of the SEC, like what time games are. There's some flexes
Sure.
out there, but it's not like, okay, everybody for what, nearly 20 years had to wait on CBS.
Yeah.
Are they using the 6-day window or the 12-day window? Are they going to do a doubleheader this week? Or are they just going to do the 3:30? And everybody else had to wait on them and plan accordingly.
I know.
It's always like that's that one person in the group. You're getting ready for a road trip, and he or she just holds the room down because you're waiting on them to make a decision.
Yeah.
That was the way it operated for 20 years.
You're right. You're exactly right.
So we're finally getting rid of it. All right. In closing, and we don't have Phil to play the reader here. The Fiver, Dimer, Neither. 3 movies. Fiver means these are rewatchable. These are remote dropping movies. Fiver means you've seen it at least 5 times. Dimer means 10 plus. Neither means you just haven't seen it. Doesn't mean you don't like the movie.
Right.
It just means maybe you didn't see it on cable enough. Maybe they don't air it enough.
Yeah.
There's some movies I really like that you can never find anymore. They're nowhere. Like they're just sitting there somewhere in a cellar and nobody chooses to stream them.
And you'd think they'd be everywhere.
You'd think they'd be everywhere. Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Number 1, we're going straight up comedy today.
Okay.
Something About Mary.
Oh, that's a dimer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't
I'm
even
with you.
think that's it's not even close. And one of my all-time favorite lines for that movie,
Yeah.
I used on my mother-in-law, and it took her almost 10 years to realize what I was actually saying. So when Ben Stiller is over at what is it, Dougie? What was his buddy that got all the
Chris Elliott.
Yeah, Chris Elliott. So he
Yeah.
goes to Chris Elliott's house. They're sitting on the back porch. Kids are playing in the yard, and the wife walks out and says, "Can I get you guys maybe some cookies?" And she goes, "What do you think? Like chocolate chip, Toll House, whatever?" And he leans back and he looks at her and he goes, "Toll House." And then Ben Stiller looks at him and goes, "Man, look at this, man. This is unbelievable. You got this yard, you got this kid, you got this nice wife, nice house." And he goes, "Yeah, each day is better than the next." So the saying actually is each day is better than the last.
Right.
That's the saying.
That's
but
the
he
saying.
says each day is better, meaning each day gets worse and worse and worse, right?
and worse.
So I would say that to my mother-in-law, and she would never get it. Go right over her head.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a dimer. That's a dimer without question.
It's not uncommon if you're around me in a social setting, just out of the blue to yell out, "Franks and beans."
Franks and beans.
It's a guilty
Where's
pleasure.
my baseball?
Yeah, it's a guilty pleasure. You know who is very sneaky good and funny in that movie? Matt Dillon.
He's awesome.
Can we do a deep dive on Matt Dillon?
The parking lot conversation
with
him and Cameron Diaz, which could never even be written today.
No.
You would never even be able to put it on paper.
You'd be canceled right away.
You'd be over. So that's
how
a diver.
Matt? So this is a guy who starts off The Outsiders.
Yep.
When you and I were a kid, like that was a really hot movie.
The Flamingo Kid.
Flamingo Kid. And then kind of bounces around a little bit. I would say goes into a little bit of a slump. Beautiful Girls is a sneaky good movie.
Yep, good movie. And then Crash happened.
He's outstanding in Crash.
It's great in Crash.
I think Crash is an outstanding. It's a true, honest movie about a delicate subject, which is very rare
in
Hollywood.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's
one of the
really few movies that handles those kinds of subjects honestly and from all sides. Again, something I don't think Hollywood's capable of 20 years later. But he's great in Crash. He was great in, I mentioned Beautiful Girl, and then he goes into a little bit of a slump. Like there's a lot of movies here I see that I never saw and I don't think did very well at the box office. So I'm not sure what he's been doing. Yeah, he's fighting it right now. I mean, he was in Herbie Fully Loaded. That's a paycheck. That's a paycheck role.
Oh,
that's a paycheck.
That sounds
role.
like a Nick Cage movie.
He was in Capone. I don't even remember him in Capone.
I don't either. I was disappointed in that movie. I thought that movie was going to be awesome.
Yeah, that was a disappointment.
I'm in for anything Tom Hardy does.
Okay.
What's the next one?
Okay. Slapshot.
10, Dimer, without question. It's the Caddyshack of hockey.
I agree with you, but here's why it's neither for me. First of
can't
all,
find it?
I can't find it. Like when it came out, I was a kid. I didn't know. It was definitely an R-rated movie, but I snuck in R-rated movies all the time. But I was basically a baby when it came out in terms of being able to go to a movie.
I didn't see it. I never saw it until I was probably in my late teens.
I didn't see it until high school on cable, and a friend of mine who was a big hockey fan, like, you got to watch Slapshot, dude. It's one of the best comedies ever. And I'm like,
it is. It's one of Paul Newman's best roles ever.
He's fantastic in it.
Different than anything else he's ever done.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's raunchy. It's but it's freaking hilarious. You don't have to be a hockey fan to enjoy it either. So it's neither for me, only because they don't air it enough. I think right now it's on Netflix. I'm pretty sure
it's on HBO Max. I think it's on Max.
It's on Max? Okay, I'll borrow your account and watch it on Max.
Yeah.
Okay, so a dimer for you, a neither for me, based purely on availability. And finally, the most recent of the three comedies, Knocked Up. I just saw this the other day on cable, and for me, it's a remote dropper. I'm not saying it's a great movie.
I'd say it's a fiver for me.
Fiver?
I'd say it's a fiver, yeah. It's not my favorite Judd Apatow movie, but it's a good movie.
Let's talk about.
I like it.
For me, it's a fiver as well. But I'll admit when it's on, I'm giving it time.
Yeah,
I'm giving it time. It's always good for a few laughs. This came right after Last American Virgin, which was kind of the introduction of Judd Apatow to America. And how about this for a bigger take? Are you ready, Lugs? Are you ready? Hot take here. Judd Apatow is the John Hughes of our time. John Hughes, who made 16 Candles, Breakfast Club.
I'm not detecting any lies. I'm not. That's a
Ferris
good
Bueller's
call,
Day
dude.
Off. Right? When you think about it. So John Hughes, who passed away about 10 years ago, there was nobody on a bigger heater in the 80s and 90s for comedies that were the most rewatchable movies, and they were all good.
As a director, but as a writer, screenplay guy too.
He wrote the original Vacation and Christmas Vacation. A lot of people don't know that.
That's right.
He did not write the European Vacation, which was not nearly as good. He did not write Vegas Vacation, but he wrote a ton of really good movies. So then we lost him, and quite frankly, comedies are in a serious drought. We don't get a whole lot of comedy. It's like watching a team run the wishbone offense in a Power Four conference.
Well,
you just don't see
what's happened is we had this spell, and it ended with Old School. When Old School came out, we had this spell between the 80s raunchy comedies, right? Revenge of the Nerds, Bachelor Party, Porky's, that whole run of just awesome rated R comedies, right? Everything turned into PG-13 in the 90s, almost everything, particularly comedy related. You had no nudity anymore, right? Remember when you were little kids and you're watching, the 80s comedies? Then all of a sudden, Old School comes into play. Wedding Crashers follows it. And we kind of got back into the 80s R-rated comedies that included everything.
Right. Two dimers right there. I think your philosophy is spot on. And then for some reason we just said, no, we're not allowed to be funny. Let's just abandon the whole genre. This is Apatow. Knocked Up, last 40-year-old virgin.
Virgin, yeah, Knocked Up.
This is 40. Underrated flick, I would say. Super Bad. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, underrated flick.
Very good.
Funny People, a little more serious on that one. Pineapple Express, it's kind of a stoner movie, I guess.
Yep, it is.
Bridesmaids, outstanding.
Outstanding.
Right.
He didn't direct that. He wrote it, though, right? Did he write it or produce it? He didn't direct it.
He wrote it. I don't know if he directed it.
No, he didn't direct it. I know he didn't direct it.
Step Brothers.
Yep.
I wasn't a big Cable Guy fan. He was involved in that.
I wasn't either.
I thought that was a disappointment. Anchorman.
Of course.
And
see, that's he and Adam McKay. You know who Adam McKay is? That's Will Ferrell's partner.
Right.
So Adam McKay and Apatow are the two guys that are always seem to be involved in all of those things.
Didn't Adam McKay do The Big Short as well?
Yes. What a phenomenal movie.
Phenomenal movie. That's a dimer.
One of my favorite movies ever.
Yes, I totally
Yep.
agree. Totally, you took a serious subject and you made it intrinsically
Ryan Gosling
captivating.
is so funny in that
Oh,
movie without even
fantastic.
trying to be funny.
Right.
Oh my God.
So I would put up post John Hughes. I would put
Yeah.
up John Apatow's comedy resume up with anybody. I don't even think it's close in the last 30 years.
It's not. I'm with you.
So there's my
It's
hot
not.
take of the day on Five or Dimer. Lugs,
I like it.
this
I
has
like
been
it.
fun. Once
It
again, you
always
brought the
is.
heat. You got your
If it's
beef
not
out of
fun,
the way.
I don't show up.
I know. You don't just donate 90 minutes of your time to any Tom, Dick, and Harry. You wait till this program. You come in. You always bring it. You're always coming out of the bullpen, throwing 99 high cheese, and we are thankful
music?
for it. A little chin music. Yeah, brush them back when you need to, and then you're not afraid to break off a couple of sliders too. I got to just ask one quick thing in closing. UFL. Did you enjoy it?
Phenomenal.
Bosses aren't listening. Did you enjoy it?
Let me tell you why I enjoyed it so much. And I have a long history in professional spring football as a player, as a coach, as a personnel guy, and now as a broadcaster. The best thing they could have done is what they did. They combined the two leagues, consolidate the leagues, cut the teams in half. Now you overpopulate the player pool of talent. So all of the teams were better. The depth was better. As a result, the football was better. I mean, I can't tell you how many games week in and week out either came down to the last play of the game or a field goal or something. And so the football was a lot better. The ratings were fantastic. The ratings were
awesome.
Great. So
That's
hopefully
awesome.
It's here to stay this time around. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with The Rock backing it financially, I think it's in good shape. And the merger, that was the final piece of the puzzle that needed to be done. I'm happy for that. Happy for you, my friend. We will talk to you before too long. We will not be strangers through the summer. And as always, Hooper drives the boat, and we appreciate you taking the time.
All right, Chiefy.
He's Tom Luginbill, producer, Mad Dog. Mike saying so long. We'll see you next week on JC and Morgan.